Welcome you all to another video, and today we are going to continue our short story, The German Refugee, which was written by Bernard Malamud. So as we know, we have known in the previous video that Gassner, he was a German refugee, he was a Jew during the Second World War. Before the Second World War, the Nazis were, that they are exploiting the Jew people in Germany and Poland. So Gassner, he has left his everything because he was actually a journalist of one magazine and he has a property. He has left all these things and he has also left his wife and he came there. And now he has to learn English language because he got a job of a tutor, of English tutor in one institute, and they already have paid him money, and therefore he has a very uh, less money, and therefore he hired a student, that is our narrator, that to teach him English language. So up to it we have seen. So now I'm going to read out and you also read with me, and we are I'm now starting. Too many of these people, articulate as they were, the great loss was the loss of language, that they could no longer say what was in them to say. Okay, so there are so many people, they came from Germany those days, and you know that the when you lost your language, you lost your personality, you lost everything. It is very difficult to speak with someone, the person who don't know your language and you don't know his or her language. If you go to the Tamil Nadu, or if you go to the Kerala or somewhere else where you don't know the language, you don't understand the language of that particular region, so it will be very difficult for you. If you watch the movie, that movie, uh, that is a very nice movie of Shah Rukh Khan and Deepika Padukone. I'm just forgotten. Yeah, Chennai Express. In the Chennai Express, you know that Shah Rukh Khan goes to the Tamil Nadu, he just run away, and then you know that there was a very that very half man was there, and he was asking him about the highway, and he was just speaking in something different language, tak tak like that. Okay, so when you lost language, you lost everything. They could of course manage to communicate. Okay, whenever you go you can manage to communicate, as you know that the Shah Rukh Khan also managed to communicate in that movie Chennai Express. But just to communicate was frustrating. Only to communicate is not, it is just frustrating. You cannot express your feelings, you cannot express your ideas, you cannot make the good communication. As Carl Otto Alf, the ex-film star who became a buyer for Macuse, put in later years later. So Carl Otto Alf was a film star. He was a German film star, but he has to come there. And he was also tutor of our narrator. And he once said, "I felt like a child, or worse, often like a maroon. I am left with myself unexpressed. What I knew, indeed, what I am, becomes to me a burden. My tongue hangs useless." So he said that he was feeling like a child, even worse than that, because he cannot express himself. Whatever he knew, he cannot make it clear, and that became the burden, and his tongue hangs like a useless tongue. Because that happens when you go to the unknown language, when you don't know about that language, that happens to you. The same with Oscar, it figures. There was a terrible sense of useless tongue, and I think the reason for his trouble with his other tutor was that to keep from drowning in things unsaid, he wanted to swallow the ocean in a gulp. Today he would learn English and tomorrow owe them with an impeccable 4th of July speech, followed by a successful lecture at the Institute for Public Studies. So Oscar was like that figure, and therefore he has also that terrible sense of useless tongue, and that was the reason of his trouble as a tutor, as other tutors. Okay, so likewise, we performed our lesson slowly, step by step, everything in its place. After Oscar moved to a two-room apartment in a house on West 85th Street near the drive, we met 3 times a week at 4:30, worked an hour and a half, then since it was too hot to cook, had supper at the 72nd Street at Mod and converse on my time. So okay, so after some days, Oscar moved to the two-room apartment house, and in the house, and there they meet there, and then actually he was started cooking at her home, but because of the noon time, it was very hard to cook. So therefore, they go to the 72nd Street automat, and at that time they converse in English. The lessons we divided into three parts. So lessons were into three parts. One is diction exercises, diction, that is vocabulary development, words, and reading aloud. So he was reading aloud, and then grammar. So these are the three things. The first is diction, then second one is reading aloud, and then the grammar. Because Oscar felt the necessity of it, because he wanted to know the grammar, because he knew some words, but he don't know that how to put words into a sentence, how to speak. And the composition correction, and again the composition correction also with the conversation. As I said, throw in a set in at supper. So far as I could see, he was coming along. None of these exercises was giving him as much trouble as they apparently had in the past. So actually our new tutor was teaching Oscar very nicely, so therefore he was not getting any trouble. There were moments of elation as he heard his accent flying off. For instance, when sink became think, he stopped calling himself hopeless. Okay, so whenever his pronunciation was becoming good, like a sink to think, and he also stopped asking himself as a hopeless. Neither of us said much about the lecture he had to give early in the October, and I kept my fingers crossed. It was somehow to come out of what we were doing daily. I think I felt, but exactly how, I had no idea, and to tell the truth, although I didn't say it to Oscar, the lecture frightened me. So they never talked about the lecture which the Oscar is going to deliver in the public affair. But when he talked when he think about the Oscar, so the lecture of Oscar actually really frightened our narrator. That and the 10 more to follow during the fall term. Later, when I learned that he had been attempting, with the help of the dictionary, to write in English and had produced a complete disaster. So, after some days, he tried to make the lecture, and he was making that with using the dictionary, and I suggested maybe how to stick to German, and we could after both try to put it into possible English. So I was cheating when I said that, because my German is meager. Anyway, the idea was so to get Oscar into production and worry about translating later. He tweeted from writing morning to exhausting night, but no matter what language he tried, though he had been a professional writer for most of his life and knew his subject cold, the lecture refused to move past page 1. It was a sticky, hot July, and the heat didn't help at all. So, actually, when the narrator suggested him that he could use the German language, and after that he can translate, they both will going to translate into English. Actually, the narrator was cheating to him, but he just wanted to make Gassner or Oscar to write down whatever he do that. But even though the he Oscar was a very journalist, and he has written so many things, whether the language is not barrier, but now something is hurting inside him, so therefore he could not able to write down his lecture out of one page only. So just one page he has written. I had met Oscar at the end of June. Okay, and by the 17th of July, we were no longer doing lessons. They had founded on impossible lecture. He had worked on it each day in frenzy and growing despair. After writing more than 100 opening pages, he furiously flung his pen against the wall, shouting he could no longer write in the filthy tongue. He cursed the German language. Okay, so it was a month, 1 month. Okay, not 1 month, just 15 or 70 days when the speaker made to the Oscar. And he tried to write down in German language, and he has written 1,000 pages, but it was not corrected. And he had just, that he just threw away those papers, those pages, and he just struck the pen on the wall. And he said that it was really, really very, very impossible for him to write down in the filthy German language. He called German language as a filthy language, even though it was his mother tongue. He cursed the German language. He hated the damned country and the damned people. Now, even though it was his mother tongue, but he was hating that language. He was hating Germany. He was hating German people because the Nazis were exploiting Jew people. They were killing Jew people. Therefore, after that, that was bad became worse. When he gave up attempting to write the lecture, he stopped making progress in English. So whenever he tried to attempt his lecture, he stopped to the progress of English. So he seemed to forget what we already knew. His tongue thickened and the accent returned in all its fruitness. The little he had to say was in handicapped and tortured English. The only German I heard him speak was in a whisper to himself. I doubt he knew he was talking it. That ended our former work together, though I did drop in every other day or so to sit with him. For hours he sat motionless in a large green velour armchair, hot enough to broil in, and through the wall windows stared at the colourless sky upon 18th Street with a wet, depressed eye. So whenever he was writing in German language, actually he also now forgetting that German was his mother tongue. And again his progress of English language was stopped, and he was not able to complete his lesson. Then once he said to me, if I do not this lecture prepare, I will take my life. He said that if the lecture will not prepare, he will commit suicide. So that was he wanted to say. Let's begin again, Oscar, I said. You dictate and I will write. The idea count, not the spelling. And then the speaker said that you can give me ideas, I will write down. There is no problem. He didn't answer, so I stopped talking. He didn't answer that. He had plunged into an involved melancholy. We sat for hours, often in profound silence. This was alarming to me, though I had already had some experience with such depression. Wolfgang Noack, the economist, though English came more easily to him, was another. So Wolfgang Noack was another economist from Germany. He was also Jew, and whom our narrator was teaching English. Okay, so he was also depression because everybody was in depression. You can imagine that if we are in India, and if you are exploiting by our Indian people, and they are snatching everything from you, what will you feel? And you have to go and live in another country. So how do you feel? So that is the depression, and that is the mental condition we can see of this Oscar and other German people, German Jew people who settled in United States of America. Arose mainly, I think, from physical illness, and he felt a greater sense of the lost country than Oscar. Sometimes in the early evening, I persuaded Oscar to come with me for a short walk on the drive. The tail end of sunset over the palisades seemed to appeal to him. At least he looked. He would put on full regilla, hat, suit, coat, tie, no matter how hot, and we went slowly down the stairs. I wondering whether he would ever make it to the bottom. He seemed to me always suspended between two flowers. Okay, so he was very, very frustrated, very, very depressed. So therefore, our narrator asked him to go for the evening walk, and he was going with him for the evening walk. And there, at least he was getting something, that fresh. And he was wearing such kind of a suit and a coat and tie, everything. And he never taken care about the hot. We walked slowly uptown, stopping to sit on a bench and watch night rise above the Hudson. When we returned to his room, if I sensed he had loosened up a bit, we listened to music on the radio, but if I tried to sneak in news broadcast, he said to me, please, I can no more stand a word misery. So when they came to that they watched the night, and after that they came to his room, and then they listened the music on the radio. But whenever the narrator tried to go to the news channels, he said that please shut off the radio, and then I shut off the radio. He was right. It was a time of no good news because it was the starting news of the Second World War. I quizzed my brain. What could I tell him? Was it good news to be alive? Who could argue the point? Sometimes I read aloud to him. I remember he liked the first part of Life on the Mississippi. We still went to the automat once or twice a week. He perhaps out of habit because he didn't feel like going anywhere. And I to go get him out of his room. Oscar at little he toyed with the spoon. His dull eyes looked as though they had been squeezed with a dark dye. So okay, so they were it sometimes he cannot tell, the speaker cannot tell, and therefore he read for him, and Oscar liked the some part of Life of Mississippi, and once or twice a week they go to there for their regular that walking, and Oscar was out of habit, and all these things, and again he ate very little. Once, after a momentary cooling rainstorm, we sat on newspaper on a wet bench overlooking the river. So there was a rainstorm, and after the rain, they were sat on newspaper on a wet bench overlooking the river. And Oscar at last began to talk. So after some days, Oscar tried to speak. In a tormented English, he conveyed his intense and everlasting hatred of the Nazis for destroying his career, uprooting his life after half a century, and flinging him like a piece of bleeding meat to hawks. So he expresses his dislike, his hatred about the Nazi, that how Nazis have destroyed his career, how they have cut off his life because already he got his half century of his life, 50 years old, and how they have flinged him like a piece of meat to hawks. Hawks, that is the birds who just eat. Okay, so he cursed uh, them thickly, the German nation, as an inhuman, conscienceless, merciless people. So he called the German nation as inhuman people, conscienceless, merciless people. They are pigs masquerading as peacocks. He said that the German peoples are pigs. He said, I feel certain that my wife in her heart was a Jew hater. And again, he also said that his wife, who was a Christian, and she was also Jew hater. It was a terrible bitterness, an eloquence almost without vocabulary. He became silent again. I hoped to hear more about his wife but decided not to ask. So actually, the speaker wanted to ask more about his wife, but because of his bitterness, because of his sadness, he didn't ask that. So afterwards, in the dark, Oscar confessed that he had attempted suicide during his first week in America. He was living at the end of May in a small hotel and had filled himself with a barbiturates one night, but his phone had fallen off the table and the hotel operator had sent up the elevator boy, who found him unconscious and called the police. He was revived in the hospital. So he told him the truth that actually he was attempted to commit suicide, and he was living in the small hotel room in the first week in America, that is the end of May, and how he was doing that. But it was the hotel operator, because of his phone fell had fallen down, and because the hotel operator sent elevator boy, and in this way he was saved. Okay, so I did not mean to do it, he said. It was a mistake. So he said that actually he didn't want to do commit suicide, but it was his mistake. And then the speaker said, don't ever think of it again. I said, it is total defeat. And he said that it is a total defeat. There is nothing. Nobody can get anything more when you commit suicide. It is a defeat, total defeat. And that is not a way to solve the problem. It is just you are escaping from your problem. It is just you are run away from your problem, not facing and solving your problem. So that is thing. I don't, he said wearily, because it is so adverse to come back to life. And he said that no, he was not talking that he was committing mistake, but he said that actually coming to the life it is his mistake. Actually, he should die at that time. So actually, he didn't want to leave off. So hey guys, here we are going to stop, and tomorrow, let me show you. This is the 1, 2, and 3, 4, 5, 6 pages are there. So in tomorrow's lecture, I'm going to cover it, and we try to finish this maybe in tomorrow lecture. So thank you for watching. See you again.